For me, the Clash were the most dangerous, aggressive, inventive group that I think I've ever seen, and they remain so to this day.
The punk movement was that black and white, edgy negative to the psychedelia of peace and love hippie movement.
It wasn't just blind rage. There was thought and intellect behind this performance and these lyrics.
The Clash works in a very, very fast way. A lot of those songs would be written in half an hour, lyrics and music.
It was the attitude, the conviction with which they were playing.
That's the punk aspect of it, the do-it-yourself ethos. The, you know, get on your feet and do it. Stand up for yourself, do it.
It was, you know, very forceful. It was changing society, and that whole vibration was in the air.
They were a breath of fresh air in a very stagnant period.
I knew what punk rock was. The moment it came along, it was made for me. I wanted that. I was a punk rocker up north, bored by crappy hippie bands, and all I was listening to was reggae and soul music and feeling very isolated. And it was punk that made me realise there were people like me in every town around, and loads of them in London.
Darling, you got to let me know. Should I stay or should I go? If I say that you are mine, be here till the day I die.
Mick Jones told me that when they first started playing, they weren't even thinking about getting a record contract. I mean, it was just out of the question. They just wanted, as three former art students would feel, they wanted to look fantastic on stage. That was the first thing they wanted to be.
So if you want me off your back, come on and let me know. Should I stay or should I go?
Would you like to interview our manager while he's here?
Catch him while he's hot.
Bernie. Leave him.
Sorry, that's Bernie Rose. Sorry about that. Come back.
He invented punk.
Bernie was the most extraordinary man that's ever managed a rock band.
It's obviously too much for him.
Bernie, had a 10-year jump on the guys. He was, 10 years older. But he was very in tune with kind of the countercultural movement and the legacy of countercultural movements. He would have known about the Paris riots in '68, or Kent State, or the Grosvenor Square riots. And, he was the one that, told the Clash, you've got to write about what you know about, what you understand.
I don't know if you could ever please Bernie, because Bernie, his dream was to have a very a band that was about anarchy, about power, about anti-establishment, and you can only go so far down that road because you'll be in prison. So he liked the idea of the chaos of it all, and he was only happy when there was chaos, and he hated it when everything went smoothly, funny enough. So he was in a position where you can't ever be happy, really.
What Rhodes, I think, contributed was the ideas that he'd got from 1968 and the whole Paris Revolution in 1968, or the student uprising in 1968 in Paris, which was ideas like situationism, certain kind of a sort of trendy vision of Marxism.
He had a fair point in the early days. I think he actually brought them together. He was a bit of a Malcolm McLaren. They definitely had a very good relationship, albeit complicated. And I don't quite know what the relationship was between Mick and Bernie, and Joe and Bernie, and Joe and Mick, and it was this sort of triangle.
When I met, as it was then, it was the first band was London SS. Mick was there, and Bernard was putting that together. There was a very different attitude, an attitude of this is going to happen. One way or another, we are going to get there. And I like that, because that's the way I felt, but no one else I've met in the whole of London had anything like that attitude, so that was something very interesting to me. although they were quite challenging.
You had a lot of trouble in Germany.
Yeah, it's fucking horrible. I never want to come back here again, it stinks. They've thrown us in the fucking slammer, they ain't got a fucking hotel for us, the gigs are fucking useless. We ain't got a hotel.
Mick Jones he lived in loads of different places around London. He's brought up by his gran. And he's a total music head. Like, from the age of 11, he was going to gigs.
His childhood dream was to be a rock star. You know, he had worked hard at his music. He had been in band after band after band. And he was a big fan of people like Mott the Hoople and the Faces, those kind of people's bands that British kids liked in the early 70s.
We got to know Mott the Hoople really well. Mick and all his mates, they used to follow up and down the country, jump in the trains, get the trains for free, turn up at the gigs, blagging their way in, hang out backstage. And that's how he learned about rock and roll, because Mott the Hoople was very good to the fans, and looked after the fans and let them stay in the hotel, which is very much part of the Clash kind of myth.
There just has to be new groups, and then that's what you got.
I think Mick's influence was there already. Mick's always been good at picking the right tunes, and somehow he's a very musical type of person. He knows what's going to work, and the set as they had it there, or the collection of songs, together worked quite well. I thought this was a band I wouldn't mind going to see.
The band that Bernie had kind of got together or kind of facilitated with Mick and Tony, they had rehearsals underneath a cafe opposite Paddington Station. And Paul Simonon turned up, not as a potential musician, but he was just there with his mate who was trying out on the drums.
What Paul Simonon really was the guy that the Clash were actually singing about. Without him, they may have been a bit of a fake, but Paul Simonon was the real thing.
The school I went to, right? I mean, they're sort of like, all the kids are supposed to sort of like be factory project, you know, that sort of stuff. And like, the school's sort of built, it's a real sort of depressing school and that. And you go there, you don't learn nothing. All you're sort of like working for is just going to the factory which is around the corner, or something like that. And, well, most of the mates I know are all working in the factory.
Are there a lot of your fans on the dole? I mean, do they feel the same way?
Yeah, else they wouldn't come to our gig.
Bernie kind of recognised, and Mick to a certain extent, they kind of realised that even though Paul wasn't a musician, he just looked exactly the part of somebody you'd want to have in your band, and they realised he had a kind of particular kind of cool and a particular attitude anyway.
He had this attitude pose thing. You know, he was very much the kind of how you imagine punk to look.
I came back to the second incarnation, which was the beginnings of the Clash, and then it was Mick and Paul and another singer called Billy Watts and Keith Levine. And that lineup, we rehearsed a bit, did a few things. It had progressed. It was a bit stronger, a bit more focused, a bit more clear, but they got a little bit more fixated on the attitude they needed for success. So there was a bit of austerity there. There was they got a bit less cheerful and more focused, I suppose. And then I came back another time, a few weeks later, to have another look at this, and I walked in and they said the singer's gone, i.e. Billy had gone, which surprised me at the time, and this is the new singer, and it was Joe. And Joe was an unlikely looking character. He didn't look like the way you expect a rock band singer to look like at all, quite the reverse. And Joe was never one for niceties or never one for pleasantries in conversation, so he just kind of grunted at me, and I thought, and his voice was kind of always got kind of funny growly quality, so I thought, he's a peculiar sort of singer, but I thought, well, fair enough, he obviously has something that he'd appreciate. Much later on, of course, I understood all sorts of other things about Joe, other qualities he had, but at the time it was very odd meeting him.
If they weren't on the dole, would they be your fans?
Well, I mean, if there was jobs, then they wouldn't be on the dole, and maybe we'd be singing about love and kissing or something.
Joe was on the scene because he was playing with the 101ers, and Mick and Tony James had kind of been to check them out previously, and they kind of recognise in Joe like this sort of really brilliant frontman.
Now, there's an apocryphal story about how he met Jones and Simonon, which is apparently that he was standing in a dole queue and they were looking at him and he was looking at them, and he thought he was going to get beaten up by them, and then he thought he was going to have to beat them up or some such nonsense. It was a very sort of punk rock, violent thing again. That, I think, there's probably some truth to that they met in a dole queue, although it also suits that whole kind of revolutionary chic that the Clash had.
Yes, he came from a public school background. Yes, his father was an ambassador. But, you know, people have to remember he dropped out and had travelled and had been a folk singer called Woody in Wales and this sort of thing. It wasn't a case of, you know, he suddenly reinvented himself as man of the people. He had rejected his background very wholeheartedly.
So Strummer walked in and he knew instantly it was going to work. He just said the chemistry was there. He just said it was absolutely fantastic. It was just like straight away it all fitted, you know, perfect.
We used to argue, and it was because I think remember Joe saying he felt I was a bit conceited and I had all my life all under control. There wasn't no sense in which I was suffering. They liked the idea of we should suffer, and I didn't like suffering. I just liked to have everything organised. You know, so the first few times we took to the stage was kind of odd because the people in the audience didn't know what the hell was happening. Didn't know what to make of it at all. Probably if you went out and started singing Chinese, you get a similar reaction of like, what the hell is this? So that was the beginning. Then we started doing some gigs with the Pistols, and the fortunate thing for us was the Pistols had already got some sort of a following of people that liked dressing in crazy clothes and mad haircuts and liked that kind of music. So we had a kind of instant audience. Very, very useful when you're setting up.
I went along to see the famous, infamous Sex Pistols, and this band Clash were on much lower down the bill, and they just came on with those skinny, horrible threads and paint spattered all over them, and singing words that sounded vaguely to do with these present-day existence at that time, as it was, instead of airy-fairy Western crap that was going about at the time.
I would say that the process from starting off rehearsing to getting a live set together to doing the gigs to doing the album, it may have seemed to happen very, very quickly and easily, but behind it was an awful lot of very hard work. We used to work ourselves very hard. We actually made a choice to say we're going to work really hard to be the best we can be. And so that meant working very long hours, rehearsing again and again, and challenging each other on every issue you can think of. So it was very hard work. It was very intense, and there was no let up. There's no room in your life for anything else while you're doing it.
Yeah, tell me about White Riot. What's it about?
Notting Gate.
Like, you know that riot they had? Well, we was down there, me and him, and we got searched by policemen looking for bricks, like, and then later on we got searched by Rasta looking for pound notes in our pockets, so...
All we had was bricks and bottles. But still.
But one of the lines in it is everybody does what they're told to.
Yeah, it's true.
Clash was special because of the combination of them, like Jagger and Richards. You had those people in that band that come together and it collides and it becomes this thing which is bigger than anybody in the band. They just had the vibe of they were the real deal.
Mick and Joe used to conceive, a bit like giving birth to something like a song, and they'd bring it along and then we'd rip it to shreds and develop it. And quite often it ended up quite differently by then, but there was no one's pride was spared. If something wasn't right, we'd be brutally honest and it'd be thrown out. Mick had that musicality. He knew how to arrange songs. He had a very musical brain. In the studio, he would always come up with ideas and you think, that won't work, and it would work. So he had that vision, or a musical vision of what things could be like. And Joe was just a great frontman, a great spokesperson, a great charismatic leader, really. So that was his role. So it all worked very well.
I think generally what they wrote about was what they saw around them. Especially on the first album, a lot of those lyrics come from incidents that that would happen in that, you know, in their day-to-day life and things they would be witness to, and that maintained itself all the way through, right through the whole sequence of albums.
Well, they've been down to the Notting Hill Carnival in '76, in August '76, and there've been the riots there. They were inspired by the fact that the black guys are fighting back, you know, against cops. Cops are pushing around, and they make a stand. And at the time, there didn't seem to be a lot of that going on with white people who just sat there taking all the shit. And I think that's what the song was trying to say.
It's often said that the Pistols made you want to smash your head against the wall, but the Clash would give you a reason. And I think that was kind of obvious because everyone was kind of angry and mad, but Strum would be like, well, okay, we're mad, but what are you going to do about it? They were the ones that I guess gave it its kind of political depth. The Clash kind of took the ball that the Pistols gave them and ran with it. I guess my white mates were coming up with their own soundtrack, something that represented the way they felt. I mean, I had mine, I had reggae music. But every generation needs its own soundtrack.
There was a lot of confusion in the early days about what punk stood for. I mean, punk had lots of kind of right-wing notions or right-wing imagery, and there was this kind of sort of very hard, anarchic, quite extreme ideology that formed in the middle. And when they released White Riot, I mean, people got the wrong end of the stick.
What Strummer saw in young Jamaican men was the fact that they were prepared to take the fight to the institutions they despised. And what Strummer was demanding was that white people should take a lesson from their black brothers and actually get up and do something about Britain in the 1970s, which was, frankly, even as a very young teenager, was a god-awful place to live.
When I first heard White Riot, I'm walking along the street singing this song, all my mates were laughing at me, my black mates. They're like, why are you singing that song, Rasta? They didn't understand what Joe was saying in that song was that the white people, especially the young people, needed to have a right of their own, not against black people, but against the system.
Nothing had ever sounded like that when I heard White Riot. I mean, it sounded like it being played at, I don't know, 1,000 miles an hour. You couldn't understand anything at all except whoa, 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 whoa. I didn't know what the hell they were singing about. And then the DJ comes on and goes, that's White Riot by the Clash.
Everybody's doing it. Nobody wanna go to jail.
They were the hottest property going. They were doing White Riot. It was fantastic. It was full on. The Clash were really exciting. I always thought they were the new Rolling Stones.
The Clash started off as a punk rock group, and they were not really happy when people tried to say a couple of years later that they had transcended punk rock. They wanted to be a punk rock group. They thought being a punk rock group was great. Not being a rock group, they liked to be a rock and roll group. In fact, punk rock and roll might be more apposite. But they were aware that this was a movement that they were part of.
They were fantastic. There was the Pistols, the Clash, the Damned, the Jam. They were the original four, and everybody else was followers on from that, you know.
And they were very proud to consider themselves a punk rock and roll group.
Who wants it to sound like the record? Me neither.
At that time, the studio was very much a kind of there was a glass, and there were musicians on one side and technical people on the other side. And there was obviously, with the punk bands, there was always going to be a mistrust across the glass because of the kind of the way it separated the two halves. So the band wanted someone they knew on the other side of the glass, which was my side of the glass, which is where Micky came in. And that was basically how the band saw his role, as being a kind of communicator.
people complained about it at the time. They complained about the production of things. I love the production. I think there's not a single song on there that I would want to change or take out. I love the whole sound of it. I think Mark Perry of Sniffing Glue at the time said it was like, said listening to it, and Perry's from around here, he's from Bermondsey. Mark Perry said it was like looking into a mirror of his life.
It is the sound of punk. Simply for the fact that the band stated to me very early on, we don't want you to mess with the sound of the band. This is what we sound like, and we want to record it that way.
Mickey Foot was doing our sound live at the time, and someone popped up with the idea that whoever does the sound live should do the album. You can argue about the wisdom of that. I think it worked out okay in the end, because what you have, I think, on that album is a sort of snapshot in time of exactly what we were doing on the stage. We didn't change much, with the exception of Police and Thieves, that was different, but all the other songs, we went in that studio and bashed out the live set and recorded it, and that's it. And I think the energy is captured there. The sound, people criticise the sound for being rough-edged, but that was what you'd have heard if you'd come to a show then.
It was the first proper punk album. It was, I mean, this came, what, a good 6 months before the Pistols released their album. It was probably the first thing that you could go out and what's this punk thing all about? And you could get this album and people put it on. And the most extraordinary thing about it is it's just got these fantastic tunes on it. Like, it hasn't got a bad track on it.
It's a rudimentary and simple and raw record. It's actually quite a complex song. Even White Riot's quite a complex song. It's not just a straight Ramalama run through. There's little bits in it, and it's cleverly done. There's a cleverness what they're doing here. The production is really, really rudimentary, but that makes it sound better. It's not overproduced. The guitars sound ace. They're just like they're really cutting and they're really slashing. There's a great energy to it. And the lyrics are great as well. Already you see Strummer's a great lyricist.
If you wanted to know what life was like in 1977 for a young person living in Britain, you play that album 40 minutes or so and you're left in no doubt as to what it was like.
It did seem to represent everything that kids were going through. It was a perfect album. I mean, I listen to it continuously now, still.
There was no messing about. The band basically played live, in the studio as a setup live. And we overdubbed whatever we needed to overdub, and it was mixed, and that was it, job done. There was no kind of discussion about where we should go, really, in terms of production terms. It was simply a case of let's capture this band as they are at this moment in time.
To me, the Clash were often as good a reggae band as they were a punk band. They had a natural facility for it. I think really what happened with the Clash is that they just honed into, a really great reggae group. They were a great reggae group.
Oh yeah, scaring the nation with ammunition. Police at the ears in the street. Oh yeah, scaring the nation with guns and ammunition.
First of all, you've got to be honest about kind of white people being inspired by black music, because that goes back to a long tradition, where they align themselves with the only rebel sound around, and invariably that is black music. I mean, what do you think Lennon and McCartney was listening to, or Led Zepp or the Stones? Difference was with the punk and black music is that no longer were they being inspired from sounds from the Mississippi Delta. We were living next door to these people. So the effect was much more direct and obvious. It wasn't disguised in interpretation.
Paul had been brought up on reggae, basically. He always had some ghetto blast with some reggae, and Joe was into it. Well, Joe and Mick both, really. But I think, as my memory, and you might find the others say something different, my memory is that in rehearsals we got bored playing the same songs round and round because you know, it's the same thing. So now and again we play something completely different off the wall just for the hell of it, to give ourselves a break. And Police and Thieves was one of those. We also did, if I remember rightly, we did Roadrunner by Jonathan Rickman and the Modern Lovers. Just a bit of fun. So we played a few songs like that just for the hell of it, not thinking we'd ever record one of them, but somehow Police and Thieves became... We enjoyed playing it so much. I suppose the transition... Someone had the idea that actually if we enjoyed playing it, maybe someone would enjoy listening to it. And in the studio, because we had all these special effects to play with and harmonies we could do, suddenly we go, oh, that sounds interesting. My memory is it was just done for fun, and it sounded so good we thought, let's do it.
And that was a very interesting and, with retrospect, incredibly important thing that they did. They brought the culture of reggae and rock music together in a really, really kind of cool way.
But they're doing the punk style, so it's kind of reggae, but it's kind of punk, and I think this is really important because it shows there's an escape route for punk. It doesn't always have to be blah 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 fast punk. It's like it's like reaching out to another culture, which is the Rasta culture, which had a similar kind of beef with authoritarian kind of thing, and saying, look, we're with you.
The song that seemingly was just set in Jamaica had a resonance here in the UK. We were all feeling the pressure.
Reggae is the dominant theme of their lives. That is really what they listen to most. You know, I mean, it's as simple as that, really, and that's all around them.
I always preferred live performance. I mean, the studio, I have to go in and make the record, otherwise you can't do what you do, but that's a job of work for me, whereas the live show, that's something you would do for free. You'd pay them to go and play, really, because it was such a buzz. For me, we were selling energy. The music was the vehicle for the energy. It was energy they were getting in the live shows.
One thing about punk bands is they're all great live bands. I mean, every band, from the Stranglers to the Buzzcocks, they're all really fantastic live. Of course, the Clash are an amazing live band. There's just the electricity. They have 3 frontmen for the starts. I mean, most bands have 1. Simner's doing all these cool shapes at the side. Jones is just like living his rock and roll dream. And Joe Strummer is just so intense. He's exploded on the stage. He's doing that thing with his head up there like that. And when you still clips of it now, it still looks really exciting. Just the passion and the intensity of the performance is amazing.
You were spoiled for choice at any point if you saw him of who to watch. And then the drummers were pretty good as well. I mean, just the whole package.
Whatever stage they took, they rocked. And there was always some controversy going on around the Clash that made them, each of these gigs, kind of an event of some sort or another.
I think what defined the Clash then was, certainly in my mind, is Strummer's leg pumping away. That far, and the way that he wasn't so much playing the guitar, he was actually attacking the guitar. It was just this kind of incredible energy, and that was very infectious. It's extremely infectious to see that. And so many people have borrowed from him, you know. I mean, you just have to look at... I mean, you watch a band like Green Day, one of the biggest bands in the world, and it's self-evident that they have watched Joe Strummer, Mick Jones and Paul Simonon on stage, and they have taken down each move. And good luck to them, by the way, because if you're going to rip off someone, rip off the Clash.
I was doing cartoons for the NME, and they let me do other things as well. I've made my living as a cartoonist. I used to work for the ancient magazines like Punch and people like that. I did some semi-serious drawings of the boys, and they came to Manchester one time, and I hovered around doing some drawings, and they, Neil Spencer, then editor of the NME, used those along with an article about them. And I don't know, I just seemed to have an affinity with the Clash, and drawing them was just a thing I do. So, you know, we just sort of did it. That was it.
I'm so bold with you. Hey, hey. I'm so bold. Watergate tape. All salute the new age. Oh, nobody escaped.
The whole stage thing, it reminded me very much of when I saw the early Rolling Stones in '63. Same kind of energy that Keith Richards was pouring out. Clash had it in spades.
I'm so bold with you.
I actually got fed up with the constant arguments and struggling. It just, I'm a very happy person. I like being happy, so I got fed up with that. So I actually announced the intention to leave. I think the attitude was, first, don't be silly, how can you leave this? And then when they realised I was determined, they said, oh, to hell with them, we'll find someone else. But then finding someone else took a while. They couldn't find someone. At first, it was hard to find the right person. So I carried on doing the shows until they found the right person. And then when the first album came along, they hadn't found the right person yet, so we did the album, which is nice because it's nice to be on the album. And then at some point, fairly soon after that, I think they found Topper and he fitted the bill, so I could go on to other things. No, it wasn't very civil at all. You present a civil front to the outside, lots of arguments. In the early days, we argued a lot. You know, you got 4 angry young men, I suppose, and a management that wanted to encourage that anger and turn it in on itself to sharpen the blade, almost. So what you've got is an unpleasant environment that produces some good results, I guess.
The 3 singles they made between the first album coming out and Give 'Em Enough Rope were vitally important. Given the 3 singles, Complete Control, Clash City Rockers and White Man in Hammersmith Palais. The thing with those 3 singles is, at the time when the Sex Pistols were splitting up, where it had all gone horribly wrong, what it did was cement the Clash's position as the punk band.
I wanna move the town to the Clash City Rockers. I need a little jump of electrical shock. Better leave town if you only wanna knock us. Nothing stand the pressure of a Clash City Rocker.
It's the weakest of the 3, but it's still interesting. It's a bit of a mess as a record, but it's interesting in the sense that it had a big rock riff at its core, in the same sort of style as I Can't Explain by The Who.
See there as they come down the escalator. Now listen to the G-train accelerator. Then you realise that you gotta have a purpose, but it's gonna knock you out.
It was much more of a heavy metal type record. It had this epic element of trying to do sort of oranges and lemons in the middle, and also this thing that the Clash always did, which was, you know, making a myth of themselves, you know, Clash City Rockers, you know, giving themselves theme tunes. And it was the weakest of the 3, but it was still a big sounding record.
Complete Control is about their appalling relationship with their record label, CBS. And I think probably rates as the Clash's greatest single. I think it's just an astonishing piece of work, and written by Mick Jones. A lot of people think because it was sung by Strummer, it was written by Strummer. It wasn't. It was written by Mick Jones, and Mick Jones is not often credited for that. With that,
another reggae classic, and a personal favourite of mine is, of course, White Man in Hammersmith Palais. It's especially dear to me because I actually took Joe to the Hammersmith Palais on the night that he was inspired to write that song, and it was interesting because Joe had gone there expecting to see this kind of roots, ghetto kind of show, not realising that, you know, the people in Jamaica, the ghetto wasn't something that they aspired to. I mean, ghetto by the very nature of the word is like get out. It's something you get out of, not get into. So when Joe saw the show at the Hammersmith Palais, it was a bit kind of Las Vegas, a bit Showtime for him. And he was thrown by this, but he came to understand that that was his own misinterpretation of where the guys were at in Jamaica. You know, people have this kind of romantic view of ghetto life, but there's nothing romantic about it.
This is a start of him really developing as a great lyricist, because he used that idea and he kind of bounced it off into a whole kind of analysis of the punk scene. But while he's kind of exploring all these ideas, he's turning into a kind of like a punk Bob Dylan, because nothing he's writing about from that point on is very straightforward.
One of the things I think that makes White Man so special is the way that the Clash were inspired by reggae, but made it their own. There was self-interpretation. So it had the feel, but it wasn't like slavishly copying reggae.
became the road manager by sheer front and bottle, and partly by default. They set off on a tour in September in '77, and I bumped into a bloke who did trucking, and I said, "Oh, how are you?" And he said, "Well, I do bands now, And I said, "Who's the next band you're doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm doing a band called The Clash." Ooh, if I buy a ferry ticket, can I come in your cab? And he went, "Sure you can." And so I went. And I'm the kind of bloke who just likes to pitch in, So flight cases coming out of a truck, I grab hold of one and help. And I just kind of pitched in with the road crew, really. That's how it started. I was just right place, right time. And all I'd done is gone to hear a band. I thought they were brilliant. I had the album. They had a punk rocker, a guy called Rodent, working with them, but he thought they were a bit kind of soft, And he was in love with Johnny Rotten. And so he went to work as a road manager with the Sex Pistols, and it left a gap, and I was there. And they said, can you put up a backline amps? Can you tune a guitar? And I went, sure I can. I'd never done it in my life, and I just fronted it out, and I kind of worked it out, and that was the spirit of the time. If you looked the part and you had the right attitude, those were the credentials for the job. And more at the point, you could take flying bottles coming at you, and you could take huge waves like Niagara Falls of gob, people spitting at you, and it'd be hanging off my glasses, great big lumps of phlegm and green spittle dripping down my shirt. And I didn't mind that, because anything was worth it for that music. So the fact that I stayed with it meant and I could drive a minibus, so I drove the band. So I'd gone along just, catch a show. And within about 6 weeks, I was the main man. No interviews, no curriculum vitae, no appraisal of my position within the outfit. Fuck it, he's here, he can do the job, leave him to it. While the Clash were just sort of bursting through old barriers to new frontiers, Robin Banks was a remarkable man to have around.
I just went along to provide a bit of light entertainment and my own form of mayhem.
I mean, Robin is a smart bloke. He's well-read and educated, and yet he is a yob of the highest order. He is fearless, and he's extremely dangerous, that when he gets bored, he creates trouble.
Just harmless, childish things like that. Setting fire to people,
But they loved it. They genuinely liked chaos and trouble, So Robin was always allowed to come along for the ride, even though he was kind of hard work. Brilliant bloke. Dodgy though.
Right, if I catch that joke through that bottle, his life won't be worth living. The band will be on in about half an hour.
My name's Barry Scratchy Myers. I was the tour DJ with The Clash from 1978 to 1980. First came across The Clash when they were just a new punk band. As far as actually working with them was concerned, I hustled Bernie and ended up doing 2 of the 4 nights at the Music Machine. And it just escalated from there, really. I emceed the first half of the Rock Against Racism gig in Victoria Park. Particularly wanted to do that half so that I could have one of the best seats in the house to see them.
Oh, they pulled the fucking plug since we're running late, that's what.
Someone's pulled the plug out.
Hey, plug it in, John! Go! Get this idiot off the stage!
When they played the Victoria Park Rock Against Racism gig in April '78, that moment, they, and particularly Joe actually, became crystallised as the focus of the positive side of punk.
Seeing them run on stage at, and I think it was at Victoria Park, Rock Against Racism gig, Paul Simonon was wearing an electric blue shirt, and the crowd, and there must have been 100,000 people there, and the crowd just went absolutely bananas. And we'd marched all day, all the way through the East End, having bloody bottles chucked at us by National Front skinheads and God knows what else. And we got to Victoria Park, and it was staggering.
They're not people who, as Susie would, or Sid, would wear swastikas, you know. They wouldn't do that, wouldn't dream of doing that. And they really become, you know, cemented in the mind as, you know, the positive, righteous spirit of punk.
In 1975, I'm doing freelance writing for Melody Maker. The first time I saw The Clash was in rehearsals at their rehearsal studio. They're all, you know, just that their antipathy to everything that you need to publicise a band. You know, they don't want to do Top of the Pops, they hate doing interviews, you know, they hate playing the game, they're not going to play that commercial game. And so they're always going to be a kind of a cult band. To some people that was very disappointing, but on the other hand, it's marvellous. The fact that they never besmirched themselves and became kind of like Elton John or became cabaret like the Stones.
People had a problem with Give 'Em Enough Rope, and hey, so did The Clash, you know. But hey, there were some great tracks on there, if I remember rightly. I love Safe European Home, for instance. But I guess they'd gone from one extreme to the other. And, you know, they'd gone from the brashness of the first album to the kind of more polished sound using Sandy Pearlman on Give 'Em Enough Rope.
The controversy emerged precisely because there was this year zero idea about punk rock. So if you went back to, if you picked a producer from essentially prior to punk, someone noted essentially for hippie work, yeah, then that was regarded at the time as being, you know, a cardinal sin.
He was a completely different kettle of fish. The second album is overproduced, and a lot of people don't like the second album, but I think the second album was quite an underrated record. But I think they didn't like the process of recording it. And Simon hated it, didn't he? Because he had to do these bass lines over and over and over again. So it kind of loses a bit of the spirit of The Clash. You know, it's not as spirited as the first album, but the songs are still really great on the record.
Again, it was just part of their courage in moving stuff forward. That they weren't going to be dictated to by the punk community what they were or what punk should be. They thought, okay, we're going to do what we want to do.
And there was a very bad period, that whole period of doing Give 'Em Enough Rope, because it was particularly for people like Paul, you know, to sit there and have to do the bass part 32 times till it was absolutely pristine and perfect.
Better than some factory. Now that's no place to waste your youth. I worked for a week once, but always got the boots.
No, it was the only person that was very good for was Mick.
Your life, 'cause there ain't much to cry for. All the young, live it now, 'cause there ain't much to die for.
You know, he learnt the technicalities of production there.
Mick's experimentation with various things, double tracking guitars, backing vocal ideas, other instruments, the odd piece of piano. And as the recordings developed, more of that happened as Mick became more confident that those elements could be incorporated into the sound of the band. So that by the time you get to the stuff they're recording a year later, you're already hearing different elements and a much more confident attitude to what they want to do in the studio.
There are a lot of weird stories about when The Clash worked with Pearlman. I mean, apparently at one point Pearlman tried to get backstage and got whacked by one of their minders, and that was when he was supposedly producing them.
We were in the dressing room and just about to go on stage, I think, and Joe or someone had said, "Don't let anyone in." And suddenly there's a big knock on the door, and there's this voice, American voice, going, it's me, it's me. And I thought, what the... And I said, no one's coming in, or something like that. No one's coming in. It's just about to go on. And they forced the door open and stormed in. So I immediately punched him in the face and knocked him to the floor. And this was before he actually produced the album. So that was his introduction to the Clash.
The first album hadn't been released in the States because it was so raw, and then given enough rope, which was tailor-made. Whatever anyone says, it was aimed at breaking the American market, and it didn't do particularly well.
They had come out with this extraordinary amount of great material very, very quickly. It was just one of those situations where all the punk bands were expected to get back in the studio and make an album as quickly as possible.
Once the band, and particularly Mick, had worked out what he could do in a studio, he was one of the first, he was basically the first member of the band who realised what the studio was capable of. And he more or less assumed the role of kind of master musician come creative force in the studio. He went from owning one guitar to having 6 guitars in the studio, and different amps and different guitars and different ideas. And so the second album was always going to be different to the first.
I loved that album at the time, and I love that album now, and I think, frankly, Perlman did a brilliant job of producing it. I mean, if you listen to the beginning of Safe European Homes, and the way it fades out and fades back in at the end, that's absolutely staggering. English Civil War, Tommy Gun, Last Gang in Town, Judy's Been Working for the Drug Lord, all of these are classic songs, and people go, well, it wasn't so good. Well, I mean, how good do you want an album to be? It was brilliant.
They didn't exactly see eye to eye with Sandy Perlman. He was, you know, your American super producer, sort of sanding off all the rough edges. And I mean, I think it's a great album, but it got panned at the time because it was supposed to go against everything the Clash stood for. It basically made them think, what's the point? We're not going to fit in anyone's box. And then when they went to America, first of all, it was Joe and Mick went there to mix Give 'Em Enough Rope. When they went there, they were smitten by the place.
The Clash, like all music, you know, although they were a punk rock band, really, you know, their own tastes were huge and varied and wide, which at the time that punk rock was exploding over here, was a lot of people thought it was kind of uncool, but they really didn't care. So whether it was old rock and roll, Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly, or whether it was kind of deep roots reggae from Jamaica, this was playing all around the band all the time. Soul music, Tamla Motown, they loved it all.
Punk was only a vehicle, in a sense. They were perfect for that very initial punk, that whole thing that kicked it off, the Pistols and the Clash, and maybe the Dams. It was perfect for 10 seconds, but very quickly it was apparent to anyone that they wouldn't be restricted and stay within those confines. There was no way that they could be retained within that and not break through those barriers.
They came back and they were like raving about the States, and then they did their first American tour.
The first tour was called Pearl Harbor 79 Tour, which I guess says it all, doesn't it?
The idea that the Clash were going to come over and bomb America, like the Japanese had done, the record company wouldn't allow them to call it the Pearl Harbor Tour.
They didn't like that at all, and So the members of the Clash, just to be harmonious and peaceful, said to me, get some T-shirts done. We knew a group of people. We knew a group of people up in Camden Town where we were based, some young punk rockers who had a silk screening cooperative. So I went to see them and said, you couldn't do us a real good shirt that'll put people's noses out of joint in the States. And they came up with full colour kamikaze Japanese pilot with a kind of, Japanese sun on it and Pearl Harbor on it. That's what we took to America, and that's what the road crew wore. And it really was, up yours, America, take this. So they started off on a very provocative stance. We're travelling on a tour bus. We're travelling on Waylon Jennings' country tour bus right across from the west coast to the east coast through huge snowstorms, terrible.
The crew were driving our own vehicles. We had this one drive, I think, over 2 days, going from LA to Cleveland, where the weather completely changed. This was, I think it was February 1979. So we start off in 70-degree sunshine in LA, and somewhere in the middle the snow starts falling. I almost drove the crew off the road one night, and it then didn't stop. It was a week, 10 days of just solid gigging through to the end of it. Being in the States, I mean, the first tour, and doing it very much, on our own terms, was, it didn't make you feel like kings, but it added to that whole sense of purpose of, taking the Clash message, if you like, to America.
There was no attempt at any stage on that first American tour in February '79 of the Clash to blend in and, grease the palms that ran the biz.
Tommy Gun, you hate happiness, you have won. Tommy Gun, they call it grave, carry it one. Big wants to die, burn the money. And Big wants to kill, burn his guns. Whatever he wants, he's gonna get it.
Support act was Bo Diddley. Wonderful man, wonderful. And really, there's a parallel here in your rock and roll history, because who had used old bluesmen, R&B acts, black men, at the Rolling Stones in '64, '65? Because the white kids, the college kids, had come along to see this new rock act from England and been told, check out your own roots, because this music that you've come to love, whether it's the Rolling Stones or it's the Clash in the '70s, actually comes from your music. And you've forgotten it. You don't know who this big man in the hat is, Bo Diddley. You don't know Muddy Waters. So the idea was to say, we have drawn inspiration from your music. We've changed it into our own music. We brought it back to you.
He'd been a huge influence on Joe, as he was on many people of Joe's age, as a matter of fact, in the mid-'60s, Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley. Joe loved Bo Diddley particularly, and would mess around and reinvent and reword various Bo Diddley tunes when he was in the 101ers, his previous group.
When I went to the record company to say, can I have the money for the support act, and our support act is going to be Bo Diddley, the record company was outraged. They were totally shocked, and they said to me, no way, you don't understand. If the Clash have Bo Diddley as the support act, the kids will can him.
The Clash never ever wanted to play with punk rockers on the bill, never wanted a whole package of punk rock. They always wanted contrast and change and difference, to say to people, open up your minds, come on.
So I tracked him down, and we had Bo Diddley, who would like to go on stage every night with $10,000 in his back pocket. However, before that happened, Joe realizing that there might be a problem, every night he went out on stage before Bo Diddley and said to the white audience, I want to present to you one of the greatest roots rock and roll musicians in the world, Bo Diddley. And so Joe put those white American young audiences on manners to treat the fathers of rock and roll, the black fathers of rock and roll, with respect. And that's what happened.
Bo had 'em rocking just as well as the Clash did. Yeah, he's a nice man, Bo.
Well, Bo Diddley was cool, you know. I liked Bo Diddley, we all did. At night, we all go to bed and we in these little coffin-sized bunks, all except Bo Diddley, who gets his guitar, and he lays his guitar sweetly, like a child, in the bed and tucks it in so it can't rattle as we're rattling across, you know, Highway 40. And he stays up all night, sitting in a chair, and he'll doze, and he's drinking rye whiskey, and his guitar is allowed to sleep. And we thought, that is amazing.
Going to America and the way that tour ended, I think they had a profound effect on them, because it had gone so well up to a point in terms of audience response, but because of CBS, it had been so badly organised and they were short of money all the time, which is something you got used to being around the Clash. There's never any money about for a long, long time.
You know, the Clash had left England in early '79 thinking, well, we're pretty much top of the pile. You know, we're hot, and we're going big and we're getting bigger all the time. And then you go to a place like America and you realise it's so bloody big, you've hardly scratched the surface. Particularly when you get away from New York or San Francisco and you go to places where they haven't heard of you, and you're playing to relatively small crowds, and you realise this is a long haul to get your music over and get people to understand it. Therefore, it requires a bit of thought as well as a longer term strategy. So the thought was, well, we've got to come back and build on this, come back to England and build on this. But on the other hand, they were inspired by that. They wanted to write. They wanted to move on up. That was the predominant feeling.
Right, well, when they came back from America, the whole American tour, I think this is significant, it ended in total chaos. And they got rid of Bernie.
He cajoled them in the early days, and it produced the first album. The second album, he wasn't really around for it because they were in America. And London Calling, he's kind of completely gone.
The upshot was of it that nobody had any money. There was no money. CBS were going cold on them.
One of the problems of breaking up with Bernie Rhodes as a manager was, one, we didn't have any money because he put a court injunction on what little money there was in the bank, so there was no cash flow, none. Secondly, Bernie had owned Rehearsals, which was the Clash's base in Camden Town off the Chalk Farm Road, and suddenly they needed a place. I worked with, my partner was called the Baker, and there were just the two of us, and that was the full sum of the outfit. 4 members of the band, the Baker and me. And we were told, go and find us a new rehearsal space that's ours, not just that we pay for by the hour, but that we'll feel at home in, that we'll feel safe in, that we can write songs in, work them up, polish them, ready to go into a recording studio. The Baker and I drove around London, we looked in Melody Maker, established rehearsal rooms. We went to a place called the Black Hole by London Bridge. Went to a very swanky gloss place called Nomis down Earl's Court Way. They gave you lovely sort of pots of coffee mid-morning. The band hated it. They didn't care that it was swish, they just wanted it to be theirs. And we found this place in this garage down near Vauxhall Bridge. And when I walked in, I knew I liked it straight away. It was run by Iranians in camel coats with big cigars and jewellery. Don't ask, because I never did. But if it was kosher, I'm a Dutchman. There was spraying going on in the back room, you know, Bentleys, rollers, that sort of stuff. And for some reason, they liked me, and I got on with them. And I said, I'd like this room upstairs. It had tiny little slit windows. couldn't see out. You felt very insulated in there, very Howard Hughesy, and they gave us a key to get in and out of there, and no one was allowed in there.
From that it was an organic kind of process whereby all these songs started to materialise.
I don't think the band have ever been more unified than when they were doing that.
And a lot of the songs change shape, and as they do, you know.
Going in, bashing out things, and the songs were just spilling out, you know, that's why they had such a wealth of material.
It was a very relaxed period after things had settled down a little bit.
Well, Mick, you're late. They're waiting in there for you.
A vital ingredient of working at Vanilla Studios was that I had a key to it, that we weren't sharing this studio with any other band. So we're in there. There aren't other studios. The 4 members of the Clash arrive and get down to work. No hanging around, no being stupid, no let's go down the pub for an hour and a half. It's straight on to work. Topper arrives, then Joe. Joe comes on the bus. He comes on the 19 bus every day. There is no car, there's no Mercedes with black windows. We had a little tiny battered yellow Renault that Mick was picked up in because he liked that treatment, but really he couldn't get in there and his guitar was too small. And Paul would come in with him as well. And they get straight down to work. About 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because it's coming into summer, we down tools, turn the amps on to standby and go over and play football. And play football for an hour, full tilt. No prisoners taken. The band liked to invite their friends down, so they would invite down Robin Banks, Chris Needs, little Terry McQuaid, a few other people they liked and trusted. But those people weren't allowed to come and hang out and hang loose in the rehearsal space. They were not welcome until it's football time. Football time, over the road we go with the football. Zippered jackets and Lewis leathers were hung up on there, and off we go, pick sides, like school kids. Oh, I want to be in this team. No, I don't want him, I want him. And people always wanted Topper because he was good. He was a really good player. Mick was pretty good too, but he was a bit showy. And he used to go, to me, pass the ball to me, to me. But he could do something with it. Joe wasn't much good, but he was very well-meaning. He was everywhere, a real live wire around the pitch. And there was Paul, and Paul was brutal footballer, get stuck in. And the tackles really could grace any dodgy football league club. It wasn't a polite game at all.
Getting very grazed up. Robin Banks was the dirtiest footballer I've ever played against. You quote me on that one.
Were you the ref?
No, I played. I loved playing. I was terrible. I can't play football, but I quite like hurting people. And it was also my way of getting back at the band, you know, because you know, I loved that band, but boy, they pissed me around sometimes, you know. And on the football pitch, I could make my point tell, you know. I could get stuck in there in a way that maybe I couldn't when I wanted to take one of them outside and say, slap, you know, behave. and this would go on every day for about an hour and a half, and we go, that was brilliant, and people be covered in sweat, and we'd say cheerio to the friends. The baker and I and the band would go back in, turn the amplifiers on, and the friends, if they wanted to hang around, would go down the pub. We'd say, we'll see you there later. It wasn't loose. This wasn't just hang out with the band. It was work, 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 with a football break of full tilt intensity.
Okay, yeah, but can you bill us that, and like we can let you have it after the gig, like tomorrow, when we've got some dough, because we're all brassic on it. Yeah, I know, but well, we've never really stitched you up in the past, have we? Well, you know, a little.
It's a strange thing, isn't it, to think that at the time, the members of the band are thinking, this is touch and go here. We're going to get dumped here. You know, we're going to be out back up to the Dole office in Lisson Grove, or forming another band or what. They had huge self-belief, but they had no confidence or belief in the record company, and nor were the record company calming them down or flagging them up, really. There was nothing going on. There was this kind of split, this isolation. Here is this amazing band on the front of the NME, and actually they're stuck in a little shithole down in Pimlico, writing music for an album that might never come out.
I don't wanna go to where the rich are going. I don't wanna know about what the rich are doing. They think they're so clever, they think they're so right, but the truth is only known. Got us right.
They always had a very fractious relationship with the label.
I do think it was a sign of the times by Epic, because the Clash were obviously moving on. It didn't look like a punk band anymore. They weren't playing like a punk band. Punk rock might be dead in the water, and now I think they probably didn't know how to deal with that. They were also really stroppy buggers.
Get off the fucking stage!
And they were quite hard to deal with. I mean, I like that about them. To me, that was attractive. But I guess if you're dealing with a variety of acts in Soho Square, in an office block, it's the last thing you want, really, is a bunch of people cutting up rough. And it got to a point where they wanted to hear what they were sounding like. And the Baker and I had no idea how to do it. We weren't proper roadies, you know. So we rang up a bloke, and his name was Bobby Pridden, and he worked for The Who. And we'd known him out and about, little bald gnome man, but a sweet man, and he brought in a T-Act recorder, reel to reel, and a little state-of-the-art Porter studio. A pair of us didn't have a clue how to work it, but the Baker was clever, and he applied himself. He worked out how to set it all up, and these new songs that became London Calling, and often they had different working titles, like Paul's song became Guns of Brixton, and the Baker recorded them so that we could play them back to the group. But it was really, really crude. I mean, cruder than people do now in their bedrooms themselves. Nevertheless, they invited Epic down to have a listen to, what would we say, work in progress. So down they come. And so came the great day when Muff Winwood, Duff Windbag, as he was called behind his back, and the A&R team, and Morris Oberstein, the president, and they came down in their cars, and they came to see, well, this band, are they any good? Are they not any good? Are they worth shifting a bit of money into? And what was the Clash's response? Game of football, lads? And they, of course, everybody wants to be a lad, don't they? Everybody wants to be a hard man and hang out. No one's going to go, actually, I've got my patent leather shoes on, I'd rather not. And it was all, yeah, great guys, hey. And the Clash took them to the cleaners that day. And they really got stuck in. And they hurt those people. I watched it, and they took great delight in producing crunching tackles and humiliating them. The talented players ran rings around these record company executives, made them look fools, and laughed at them, laughed in their faces. And they limped off, putting their jackets, their suits back on to play back the tapes, these really, really rough tapes that became, you know, the polish of London Calling. It was an immense turning point that afternoon. I recall it well.
I can't describe the atmosphere during the making of that album. It was a mixture of sort of lunacy and total creativity.
And I think that's evident in the album, because you can see them moving in so many directions. There was no one direction. It was like, let's bring all our musical influences to bear on this, and it did.
The production values on it are very high, but not that it's a polished record, it's just that a hell of a lot of thought has gone into how all those tracks were constructed.
Well, the legendary Guy Stevens, I mean, his His spirit overhangs London Calling. I mean, he's passed on now, as we know. He wasn't the sort of bloke who'd sit at the console board. You know, leave the, you know, Bill Price, the engineer, would be doing that.
He came down to vanilla quite a lot. He didn't just turn up at Wessex, and he was like an agent provocateur, really. That was his role. I mean, he just came and created this energy, whether it was attacking people with step ladders or throwing furniture around. You know, he certainly knew how to get people on the ball.
He did loads of crazy stuff, but he really entertained the band. And one of the most important things in the studio, if you make rock and roll records, have a great atmosphere. If you've got a really good vibe, you'll make a great record. With Sandy Pearlman, the vibe was like dead, and he still made a good record, but it's not as good as London's Calling. And he did things like they come in and they set up, and to get warmed up before they played a song, they did Brand New Cadillac, and they just did it as a warm-up. And Guy Stevens goes, great, that's it, in the can, one track. And they go, but it speeds up towards the end. And he said, he shouts back, but rock and roll's meant to speed up towards the end. Whereas nowadays, if it's like click track, click, 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 everything's the same speed. When you listen to Brand New Cadillac, it sounds really exciting, because the bands naturally play faster towards the end of the song, because you get more and more excited.
If you ask me, he was the perfect man for them, because he was as dangerous and more outrageous than they were, but he also was grounded in a knowledge of real music and roots of music. And I would imagine Guy was a very strong influence, albeit if it was only on Mick, who then took on the mantle of being the producer when Guy left. But I think for me, I think there's a strong influence of Guy Stevens on that album, in as much as he brought them to the point where they recognised that whatever went before the Clash was of some worth, and that they could learn from that. And he obviously knew how to lay down the basic tracks and get that Spectre sound that is there on some of them. And I'm sure that was Guy, you know.
The record company are going, you need a top-notch American producer to polish this act. And they're going, no, we don't. We know exactly what we want. We want someone with feeling. We want a record producer who understands us, who understands raw emotion, not polished technique. We've had all that before, and it don't work with us. Us is about gut, about instinct.
He's one of these figures who's just a great catalyst, a great artist. You know, he would do things like pour a bottle of red wine into a piano while Joe's playing it because he'll make the sound better.
The record company were horrified. Guy Stevens was a nightmare. Guy Stevens was a head case. Guy Stevens was a drunk. You don't work with Guy Stevens, and they insisted. At the end of the day, there's a lot of factors that make London Calling a great, great album. And it's not just down to Guy, but a lot of the atmosphere that makes that record great, and the confidence to just run with the ball, to use that analogy, is Guy Stevens' influence.
I don't reckon there's any track on it that remotely resembles 1977 punk.
This shows an absolutely vast kind of vision. It's got enormous panorama. It was a double album sold for the price of a single, which was a totally punk rock thing to do. It was brilliant. You know, we couldn't believe it. That was the Clash saying, we're going to offer you something at the right price. That was the Clash practicing what they preached.
They were the first ones to break free of that kind, you know, the shackles that punk had become, you know, thinking that it had to be about loud, fast guitars. I mean, you can be silent and deadly too.
As they were writing it down in Pimlico, just prior to the shift up to Wessex Studios to do it for real, there was suddenly a bit of edginess, a bit of nerves. Hang on, we think this is good, but is it? That artistic doubt crept in. They would look across the room at me and at the baker and at each other, checking out, you know, is this any good? You can only do that so often. You've actually got to bounce it off other people at some point. And we went and hired the Notre Dame Hall just off Leicester Square.
They played 6 tracks from the new album, which no one had heard yet, and it was stuff like Lovers Rock. So you can imagine the confusion that was already spreading you know, amidst the Clash fans, like, what are they doing?
And it went down, okay. White Riot went down, wow. White Man Hammersmith Ballet, yeah. And London Calling, So there is that slight bit of doubt, because they, to play it live, at that point, it was quite a simple number. It's just the four of them, really. So we go into Wessex and they realise Mick is a very good musician. He can lay, he understands overdubbing, he understands multi-layering, and he can do that stuff. But there's some stuff he can't do. And so we have to bring a keyboard player in. And Micky Gallagher, who was the keyboard player with the Blockheads, with the Endurers band, who we knew him. And he's a cool guy. And he fitted in. And that's more important than can he play. It's, is he a cool guy and then can he play? And the answer is, yes, he can. His shawaddy-waddy teddy boy jacket's a bit iffy, but we'll overlook that because he's a good guy.
I got on very well with them. Even on a social level, we hung out a bit, and I got the job to go along to do keyboards. So I was man of the flavour of the time, and so they got me in to do keys, mostly Hammond, and I went in and did it as a session.
So he plays and he brings in his B3 Hammond Leslie, and he starts to put organ on, and the members of the Clash are going, oh, wow, that's pretty damn good. So they get some other guys in, some guys that Joe knows, Irish horns, and that's pretty good. But hang on, we're not going to try and turn this into a major touring outfit. You know, how's this going to translate? Well, the difficulty with that was the first shows are going to be in the States, and we can't take too many people. We just don't have the dough. But we'll take Micky Gallagher. And so for that tour, the Clash became a 5-piece.
It just happened that Joe Strummer rang me up. He said, we're going to America. Why don't you come to America on the road with us? And I said, well, it's a great idea, but, you know, I really should take my wife and kids for a holiday. And he said, well, bring them along as well. So that's what happened. And they, in fact, took their girlfriends and things on the road, so it was very strange. Actually, it was great charabang across America. Yeah.
Okay, excuse me, an example of, you know, the rapidity with which things were developing with the Clash was that they recorded London Calling in Wessex Studios, but didn't have time to mix it. They just left the record to Guy Stevens and Bill Price. They went off on their American tour. They went to California.
Word had certainly got out about them more.
The Clash gigs were just so much, I don't know, just on another level. From the word go, it was like take no prisoners, get out there. And that was brilliant. I loved that about it.
Full-on 8-week assault in all areas. If the first US tour was tentative and deliriously happy, but slightly nervy, the second one was full tilt with tails up.
Chaos. Chaos in a good sense. Intense, bouncing from city to city, going to parts of the States that we clearly didn't cover the first time round.
The material that they'd never really played live, that became the tracks on London Calling, were played with immense enthusiasm, spirit and power and attack. And the longer that tour went on, the more those tracks rose to prominence. A very good example of it would be Waiting for the Clampdown. It worked, and so that material rose to be the showstoppers rather than just filling tracks with the old hits like White Riot as the main tracks. The balance shifted.
Johnny approach you then to go on the tour? How did that come about with the whole war artist?
It's just, yeah, it's a marvellous idea. It wasn't mine. Well, Johnny and I used to get pissed together, and I don't know, I think he suggested it originally, and I just said, yeah, it'd be great to go along and draw the Clash in America, yeah. And it just, the drunken thing that seemed to take off, yeah. And Joe was very much for it, and I think Mick was keen on it as well.
Right, could you just show me some of the things that you
sure.
drew on the tour?
Well, I don't know. I got bad back, folks. Drinking and falling over. There's a nice thing there that was drawn on the spot in Minneapolis, St. Paul, with a huge converted ice rink they played. Huh? Yeah. It's another typical. I was side stage most of the time doing stuff like this. You know, it's just a shot of. I think it's Joe and Mick. I can't see from my position. And I've got notebooks. I've got books still with loads of stuff like this in. Lots of it got sold, framed and sold. And I didn't go on to. Shall I move that? Yeah, go on. I didn't go on to like converting them into huge canvases one, because I don't know. I thought it'd become a bit irrelevant, the whole thing, and I was a bit jaded with the whole thing. I would go to the sound checks and do drawings there. And then at the shows, it was bloody difficult because it's dark, of course, and stood there farting about with a pad and ink and God knows what. And well, we managed to get some nice sort of illuminated things out of it all, nicely lit stuff, lit by electricity most of the time. Joe especially, I think, was tickled by the idea of having their own pet artists, their own mad pet artists. Why not?
They were always very relaxed on the road. I remember that. You know, there was not too much prima donna stuff going on. You know, they had a job to do, and they did it. And I like that professionalism. Yeah, they used to hire me really dodgy Hammond organs to play. That rattled and banged, and the secret with a Hammond organ is the Leslie cabinet, where you have a pedal and you just click it or move it with your hand, and the spinning horns double up in tempo, so give you a real whirling effect, which becomes part of your playing. If you're a Hammond player, you get to feel this thing, and now every now and again you click it on it wouldn't happen, it would just be churning away. So to make it happen, I'd have to kick it. Hire me some good equipment. Of course, the audience thought this was all part of an act, that I didn't really have to kick it. You know, I was just being dramatic or whatever. But it was really true. Every you know, in the middle of every number, I'd be kicking away at this Leslie speaker to make it go round.
It was a bloody good laugh for all. Nobody can deny that who went on that thing, he didn't have a good time, you know. I was shagged out by the end of it, as everybody was. We all had our nights off. I had a night when I was so buggered I missed going seeing Buddy Holly's grave, but everybody crashed out at one point along that thing.
Where it started to flag out of sheer physical tiredness, because I mean we ain't using a Learjet here, we're travelling in a pretty crappy bus. This ain't very luxurious. But at one point, Bill Price flies in, and in his bag he's got the final mixes of London Calling, and they stick them on the tour bus, and the silence drops and the road's unfolding and everybody listens. And it's amazing. It's an amazing, hair-chilling, you know, the moment where everybody looked at each other and realised quite what they'd done. I mean, they knew it was good. They didn't know it was this good. Track after track, all the, you know, the running orders all worked out, and all that's left to do is print the sleeve. And my God, what monster have we unleashed? This is wonderful. It was a great moment, and from then on in, it was a home run all the way home. So I would say that's the moment they realised their potential, and that they'd taken 6 months to make this monster. And they've done it. all the dark days in Pimlico, the trudging up and down on the tube to Wessex to Stoke Newington, it paid off. Working with a madman like Guy Stevens, racing around the studio, hitting people with chairs and ladders to inspire a better performance and actually work. It was a wonderful moment.
She's constantly touted as a very wonderful album for it. Oh, man, yes.
You mean the photograph?
The London Calling, yeah, the whole thing, yeah.
What about the bit that you did?
The bit? Did I only do
the whole...
I did the whole bloody concept, my dear. There's the famous story about the contact prints. I immediately went for that photograph because it's classic, and apparently Joe was right behind me. Joe argued for it. He had to argue with Penny because it's out of focus slightly, apparently. But the image is just so marvellous, and I couldn't have told anyway because I didn't have my glasses, I didn't have any contact lenses. It just looked fine to me. It's a bold image. I started the front cover and the back on tour, yeah, and I did the lettering, the Elvis Presley style hand-lettered stuff in Los Angeles in an art studio of CBS's over there. They whizzed that back to England, and we ordered the shot from Penny, and it had to be cropped the top because it was awful. There was lights and shit, so squared it off and slapped the lettering on. It just seemed natural to put the Elvis Presley style lettering. It just, I don't know, rock and roll, a whole thing. So as Elvis Presley sums up one era, they certainly summed up their era.
But where they were last night, no one can remember. Somebody got murdered by the keeps forever.
They've really got one absolutely fantastic album there, but they released like 4. You know, it was a ridiculous amount of stuff to actually take in. But if you'd condensed that down, I think we would have had another sort of London Calling on their hands, personally.
When they came to record Sandinista, Strummer told me that they had this band meeting where they said, OK, the last time we did 2 for the price of 1, so now we're going to do 3 for the price of 1. And they set themselves this task. It's a bit kind of silly. It's a bit of a crazy thing to do because there's no... Just because you produce 3 bits of vinyl, it doesn't necessarily make it any better value than 1 bit of vinyl. But they decided to do that, and there was a kind of sort of crazy nobility about that. And I think then they ended up desperately trying to fill it. There are an awful lot of fillers there.
Sandinista was ahead of its time. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's a dub album. It's a jazz album, it's a soul album, it's a calypso album, it's got spoken word bits on it, it's got silly bits on it, it's massively long. It's a record that I think people today kind of understand better than they did at the time.
There's so much great music on there, and some of the kind of rock reggae stuff they play there is fantastic. You know, they've really got that reggae thing down off pat now. Sometimes on a sunny day you put that record on, and now it's on CD, it makes a lot more sense. You just leave it on for the whole extent of it. It really does work, you know. Yeah, there's some tracks that aren't so great, but I'd say the bulk of it's really good stuff.
I think if you listen to the Sandinista tracks now, you listen to something like Somebody Got Murdered, or Police on My Back, and you can hear that they're that far from being absolutely brilliant records, and yet they're just not, because they sound muffled and messy and you can't really hear what's going on.
We're about to present a song off their current triple record album, which is called Sandinista. It's called The Magnificent Seven. Would you please join me in welcoming to our show The Clash? Here they are.
How long enough to stop? Get your car out of that gear. Don't you ever stop? How long enough to stop? Get your car out of that gear.
I was doing more and more work with them. Went over to New York, and I took Norman Watroy, the bass player from the Blockheads, over there to add the funk. So Norman and I went down to the studio very early in the morning. I remember it was pouring with rain, lightning, all sorts of things. It was really lashing down. We got the studio, there's no one there, so we sort of stripped off what we could, put our socks on the radiators and things, started to dry off, have a cup of tea. The engineer came in, you know, lit up the machines, and Norman and I went in the studio and just started jamming, you know, with the piano and bass. We just got set up, and the engineer was taking sounds. The Clash came in the middle of it, and said, "What's this?" And we said, "Oh, just jamming." So next thing we know, they'd sent out for another 16 or 32 track machine, wherever they were working on. There were loads more reels, and they copied what we'd done to that reel, and then they cut the two things up into sort of verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. Joe went out and wrote a lyric, and that was Magnificent Seven.
Rain, at 7 a.m, move yourself to go again. Cold water in the face brings you back to the sharp old place. Like old nuts and your bankers too. Must get up and learn those rules. When a man, a crazy chief, once is sun and once is deep. AM, the FM, the PM too. Churning out that boogaloo. Gets you up, I get you out. But how long can you keep it up? Give me Honda, give me Sony. And with phony, I'm gonna die. Indian sense, English pounds and Eskimo pants. You love! Don't stop, give it all you got. You love! Don't stop, give it all you got.
There's another one called Lightning Strikes, which was a jam, and it was about the day, because as we came to the studio, it was lightning, it was rain, there was, you know, so it was an on-the-spot sort of thing, yeah. So there was a lot of creativity went down from the Blockheads end, I think.
A word of caution for you. The fire marshal say last night Bonds was crowded beyond its legal capacity. So if you want to see the Clash tonight for the midnight performance, you have to have Ticketron tickets or they won't let you in the front door.
Tickets to their week-long stint in Manhattan oversold by Bonds Casino.
The Clash sold 3,500 tickets each for a week of shows. Last night, although there was no problem, fire marshals determined 1,800 was a safe capacity based on the number of fire exits. The Clash decided to honor Ticketron tickets sold nationwide for the night on the ticket. For the rest, they have rescheduled another show for each overbooked night, or given the folks the option of a refund.
That news crackled around America and made people understand, well, I've never heard of this Clash lot, but, you know, normal rock bands don't get their fans fighting in the street because they couldn't get into the gig, you know, and they certainly don't bring New York, you know, the scene, done everything town to a standstill.
It was a moment they took New York. They'd had, on Sandinista, they had Magnificent Seven, which is essentially a rap record. It's probably the first British rap record.
The hip-hop thing's starting to take off, and that had a big effect on the Clash, especially Mick Jones, because all of a sudden they're writing things like Mag 7 and Lightning Strikes. And then some of the black radio stations are picking up on these tracks and playing them on the radio stations. So that was a buzz for them to kind of embrace hip-hop and make it part of their repertoire.
The Clash picked a dozen other groups to appear with them as opening acts in the hopes of opening ears to different music. Last night it was the New York rapper stars, the disco DJs who have turned their platter chatter into an art form.
This is one of the great things, actually, which is so clear about them, was that they would go to a place and they wouldn't just go and tour it, which is what most bands do, and you can hardly blame them. They're not there for very long, you know, it's just one city after another. The Clash would go there and they would immerse themselves in that culture, whether it's a visit to Jamaica or whether it's going to New York and then discovering the whole graffiti and hip-hop thing and the body popping thing and everything else that was just starting at the time. You know, it was in its infancy, and they just immersed themselves in that. They immediately understood how significant this was going to be.
Let me ask you about the Bonds concerts.
We're in the middle of them.
Okay. What happened down there? Do you know what happened so that a lot of people had to wait to get in and the place supposedly was oversold? What did happen to the best of your knowledge there?
Well, as far as I think every club in New York jams in as many people as possible, well, anywhere in the world. And the fire department, sometimes they come down, sometimes they don't, you know, and they happen to come down. I mean, we kind of walked into the situation blind. You know, we've just been touring Europe, and we come straight here from Europe without a break. And we just thought, well, we got we sold out 7 nights in this nightclub called Bonds, and the stand-up venue. Everything is kushti-mushti. But then we arrive, and the fire department, the building department, they're all shutting the place down faster than we can open it, you know. But it's all right now, because we're here for the duration.
I understand that, but many groups would say, look, we're going to play the 7 performances, and then no matter what happened, no matter how many people have to stand and wait, we're going to go home.
Right, let's go.
Oh, no. you men did not do that.
We don't want to poo-poo on the fans. You know, it's very important that, seeing as they've bought tickets, right, we feel it's our responsibility to honour it.
Can I ask what you're putting on me?
It's a nice clash bench.
Oh, okay. You've been described, or I think one of you has said you're a group that's unmanageable. Do you really feel that way about yourselves, that you're maybe unmanageable in the sense of being, forgive me, out of control?
We have a manager. We have a manager.
How's he doing?
We've had him before as well. We've had him before.
And then he went away for a while and came back, huh?
He went to the funny farm. Where life is beautiful all the time.
Nice and happy. Fairport Lounge.
Bringing back Rhodes was, I mean, I suppose you could say with hindsight it wasn't a particularly good move, but I think it's a bit unfair to blame it on Rhodes. It probably didn't contribute too much to the relationship between Strummer and Jones, which was probably deteriorating at the time, just because I think Strummer regarded, there was very much a kind of father and son thing, I think, with Rhodes and Strummer. But I don't think that you could blame Rhodes on the split up. I mean, I think Rhodes coming back was maybe symptomatic of things that were going wrong already in the band.
It was the beginning of the end, because I think it was the first major decision in the Clash's career which Mick was kind of overruled on, and he very much didn't want Bernard back, and Joe and Paul did, and you can look back and you can see this was the beginning of the parting of ways.
I don't think everybody wanted to get back with Bernard. I think Joe did. Maybe he'd lost his way somewhere and was trying to, you know, find his footing again by going back with Bernie. But it didn't work with me and Bernie.
Strummer and Simon have a little swing back to the punk rock thing here. They want to get the band to be a bit more punk rock street, get back to our roots kind of thing. I think Mick Jones is living in a different kind of world now.
There just seemed to be a widening rift. There was Strummer and Simonon in one camp, there was Mick Jones in another camp, and then there was Topper Headon, who was so strung out by this time on heroin that he really wasn't any use to either camp.
At the start of 1982, the Clash toured the Far East for the first time, and they played Japan. They're loved in Japan. They play Australia, and Australia's been waiting to see them for, since 1977. So they're breaking into new territory. They're kind of going global, but at the same time, there's a fundamental problem in the band, and that's Topper's heroin habit.
It's very difficult to work with someone who's on heroin. I mean, getting them in and out of countries is difficult enough. If they're carrying stuff on them, everyone's going to get in trouble. His drumming was getting hard. He couldn't get through whole sets. It's difficult for him. Because they Clash used to play like 2.5 hours, like really massive long sets. If you're a heroin addict, that's hard work.
It did embarrass them, Topper becoming a heroin addict, because that kind of rock decadence was everything they stood against. Producer after producer that worked with the Clash sort of have a stunned amazement about Topper Headon, and it's not just he was the best drummer. He was probably better at all the other instruments than everybody else as well. He was a natural musician. It was not attitude with him or playing in a particular, a particularly recognisable style. He was an all-round jazz-trained musician who could play anything at any tempo, in any style.
Topper at the time, Topper Headon, was just he was an astounding, talent. And I loved playing with him as a drummer, fabulous, And these days he's sort of given it all up, which is a shame.
Topper had interest in other kinds of music, and he brought that to the band and was part of dragging them into other kinds of material. When I came back in 82, I was quite shocked how much variation there was. Because when I left, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, bang, crash, wallop, and suddenly we had all this other stuff. So that was Topper was a big part of that, I think. People always think that Topper and I don't like each other for some reason. I don't know why, they just kind of assume that, but we've always got on fine right from the first time we met. Because it's funny, when I first met Topper, he was just been brought into the band, they said, would you mind just showing him a few of these things we've been doing? So, because it's hard for a guitar player to explain to a drummer what this part of the song is, so we did that and it was fine. And then, of course, when I came back in, I had to figure out how he did what he was doing, so it's quite a weird reversal there. Coming back into the band, everyone had changed, because when you're 20 and then you come back at 26, you change a lot between those two ages. You develop a lot. So whereas we were like frantically angry young men shouting at each other the whole time at 20, things had changed a lot. People were more mature, different issues were coming up then. I enjoyed it more, I think, the second time round, more comfortable. And I think one-to-one I got on fine with everyone. And Bernie, funny enough, was back then. He'd gone and come back at the same time. That was a bit odd. And Bernie, Bernie was the same as always. I don't think he would change.
The Clash would be the first to admit, and it's kind of obvious, that in their attempts to do the right thing, sometimes some of the things came off a little heavy-handed. But, you don't get it right all the time, and I kind of dug the fact that they weren't afraid to make mistakes. It's better than being a wimp and not trying to do anything. And I think there were a few almost embarrassing moments in their career. But to me, it all added to part of the whole. You don't need to be perfect to do something good.
Touring in 82, we were doing a lot of the songs from Comeback Rock, because obviously that was a new album. I think the song I liked best at that time performing live was Straight to Hell. Just because of the way Joe sang that song, a lot of feeling in it. So I enjoyed doing that. And as a drummer, you're thrashing away like crazy, and that song you could lay back and listen as well as play.
If you can play on the fiddle, how's about a British chick and Rio? Speaking King's English in quotation, as their head towns feel the steel mills rust.
It doesn't actually sound much like The Clash, does it, when you hear it? But it's got like... It's interesting because they've gone off somewhere else. It's quite different from Sandinista. They swerved off. There's a lot of New York in that record. You can hear a lot of the electro stuff soaking in there. But there's some great songs on there.
This is your paradise.
I think Combat Rock is a good album. At the time, it was people writing about it as if it was the best Clash album. I think it's marred by that sort of early 80s production it's got. I mean, there are great songs in it. I mean, Straight to Hell's a fantastic song, but Should I Stay or Should I Go is not a fantastic song, by the way. That is that is Jones doing the Stones, and I'm sure Jones could wrote that in his sleep.
What happened was, like, Mick's musical vision departed from Joe and Paul's. Mick produced and mixed a version of the album which was essentially another double album. But it was decided that by the record company and basically the other guys in the band that they couldn't put out a double, and they brought in somebody, Glyn Johns, to chop it down to a single, very much against Mick's wishes. So you have another episode in the story where Mick is being kind of overruled by the other guys in the band. Even though in some senses Mick was the driving force behind the music in that band. And thus you start to see the beginning of the end.
The demise of the Clash, you know, I've got a different take on it. I mean, it was never about longevity. It was about, you know, having a window of opportunity and what you did with that window of opportunity, making the most of the space that you had, you know. And, you know, most of the cool bands that I'm into, if you check out their career, it's usually about a 7 or 8 year span. And it occurred to me that maybe, you know, to grow as individuals, you have to break out of that kind of gang thing. You know, to the point of where I'm almost suspicious of people that are together for longer than 7 or 8 years. Longevity was never the point. And, you know, people cite, you know, musical differences, Mick becoming a problem. Me, I don't know, I don't even care. I mean, for my money, you know, the longer bands are around, all they do is end up destroying their own myth anyway.
Darling, you got to let me know. Should I stay or should I go? If you say that you are mine, be here till the day I die. Come on and let me know. Should I stay?
All the time that they were making great music together, when they got in a room, they could forgive each other anything, you know, because the end justified the mean. But then you got to a point in the summer of 1983 where they really didn't like the music that Mick was presenting to them. Mick had got fed up with Bernie. Bernie had offered them management contracts that they wanted to sign. Paul and Joe signed theirs. Mick didn't. He wanted to run it past his lawyer. All those divisions in the band came to a head because they weren't making great music anymore.
We toured very hard for a year. Then we ended up in Jamaica in January in '83, some festival there. That was fun. And then we came home and had a break because everyone was a bit worn out at that stage. And I suppose we'd been pushed together too much and got a bit sick of each other. And then at that point, Joe and Paul came up with the idea of getting rid of Mick. I could never quite see that really, how that would work. I could see why they might be fed up with him after a year on the road together, but I just couldn't see a band without him. I just couldn't see how that would work. But, you know, I don't think when you've been on the road for a year like that, you're not in the best frame of mind to make a clear, lucid judgment. You're in an emotional state and you've had enough, and you make maybe not such good decisions.
Once Jones went, of course they should have split up. There's no doubt about it. It was sad to see them carrying on without Jones. It really was.
Should I cool it or should I blow?
Without Mick Jones, there wasn't a Clash. There's absolutely no way you could have thrown out Mick Jones, Joe Strummer or Paul Simon and had the Clash.
When they recorded the album with Bernard as the producer, that Cut the Crap in Munich, I mean, it's quite clearly all that musicality and genius that Mick brought to the Clash was gone. I mean, Joe was still writing pretty good lyrics, but that was all that was left. There was everything that was good about the Clash had just sort of been poured down the drain.
What came out after that, the new version 2 or version 3 or whatever you call it, it wasn't really happening. I couldn't see it without Mick. I couldn't see it happening without Mick.
Was Cut the Crap that bad? It wasn't that bad. It wasn't as hideous as people say it was. It has one fantastic song on it, This Is England, which is just terrific. It's inventive. Production-wise, it's extremely inventive. They did combine, you know, sort of hip-hop, which was then I think known as electro. They combined that with not with punk rock, but with rock and roll. But there was just something desperate about it.
I did meet up. We had a party, as I remember. I forget what the occasion was. I came along, met the new guys and all that. But somehow it didn't seem like it was going to go anywhere. And I think it's too many changes. You know, people can cope with one change in a band. They don't like it, but they'll cope with it. But you can't change the whole thing.
The reviews, I mean, obviously the chart position did pretty poorly, but the reviews were savage. And obviously, I think it was a strange moment of realisation for Joe Strummer, that he realised that he'd gone along with this idea of calling the album Cut the Crap, and that this was a gift to every critic of the band. They'd cut a piece of crap, you know, and I think that was kind of the last straw when it suddenly kind of hit him, you know, as every reviewer lined up to use the cut the crap pun, that of just what a monumental folly it had all been, and he just called a band meeting and essentially, you know, gave the other three their cards.
What is your motivation, as I said again in introducing you, for selling records at discount prices or lower prices?
Same as the
same
tickets.
reason, but where do you get this motivation? Because a lot of groups, all they come into the business for is to make a lot of money and to hell with the...
Yeah, but we used to be them.
Right, and so
You know.
like, we haven't forgotten what it's like. All the other groups have forgotten what it was like.
Because they're all
Because
too
we know
busy.
that one day we will return and become nothing again, you know?
I mean, the reason the Clash was so great was for 4 reasons. Topper Headon, Paul Simon and Mick Jones and Joe Strummer. That's it, man. Simple as that. It was the dynamics, the chemistry between those 4 guys that made the Clash what they were. You know, and that combined with motivation, determination and passion, you couldn't fuck with them.
What made you come on this programme as opposed to any other that you've not been on so far?
You can just plug in and play like you do on a gig, you know? It's no miming, you just plug in and play.
The Clash's body of work just stands up. I mean, the funniest thing about it is, like, 85% of it isn't punk rock. It's this weird kind of world reggae, dub, Clash kind of music. It's not even really rock music, a lot of it, but it's proved hugely influential. People saw that the Clash were light years ahead of their time in getting into reggae and rap and kind of almost like soundtracky music. And I reckon those records just sound brilliant today. And the later ones that were kind of dismissed by people at the time, they make a hell of a lot of sense now.
To revelation, the next generation will be from Genesis to Revelation.
They had an epic feel about them. They painted on a huge canvas, despite the fact that they wrote these incredibly tight rock and roll songs. The songs felt as though they were about something enormous. They felt as they were either about your life or they were about an issue which you felt you had to care about. I mean, you know, I didn't know who the Sandinistas were before Sandinista came out, but the Clash actually made me want to pick up history books. It made me want to read the news, made me want to watch the news. And that's pretty important, you know, if you're a kid and you're a teenager, the fact that a band can make you do that. They can make you interested in the world in a bigger way than you ever thought possible.
I think the Clash's legacy is really that they happened in spite of the business and not because of the business. You know, the whole DIY thing, the whole thing about a good idea attempted is better than a bad idea perfected. You know, making your problems your assets. You know, the Clash were the embodiment of all these ideas.
I think every group labours under the shadow of the Clash in exactly the same way as they still labour under the shadow of the Beatles. Every group has to live up to this band's commitment on some level or another. If they don't, you might not be able to question their music or their money-making ability, but you question their commitment and their integrity, and you can question them correctly, because the Clash proved that you can do this and you can do this properly.
All the best moments really are on stage playing live. The good thing about the Clash is you never knew quite what was going to happen. You do get surprises. So we changed the set. Joe would be quite unpredictable, and yeah, I mean, right in the early days, I remember doing a show, I think it was the ICA, where someone was sitting there with a razor blade chopping up someone's ear, you know, and that wasn't nice. But what I mean is, strange things used to happen. Second time round, I remember doing a show where there was a thunderstorm, and I've never seen so much rain in my life. The whole stage was drenched. It was always just drenched. And the thunder and the lightning kept going, and the audience kept going more and more and more. They just loved it. And once you drench, don't you? So it was kind of a special show. It's a love with a rock and roll, wow. It's a love with a gangsta war. It's a love with a